I'm 95 years old. And recently I moved into a college dorm. Yes, really. When my daughter heard about it, she thought I had completely lost my senses. The director at the nursing home I had visited called the idea very unusual. But the three 22-year-old girls I live with now, they simply call me the best roommate they've ever had. And honestly, the choice that everyone thought was crazy may be the very reason I'm still here today. Before you assume this is just a story about an old woman making strange decisions, let me tell you something. Only a few months ago, I was exactly where you might be right now. Maybe your children have started leaving brochures about assisted living on your kitchen counter. Maybe the steps in your house feel steeper than they used to. Maybe the rooms feel larger, quieter, emptier. And deep down, you might be wondering how much longer you can keep managing everything alone. That was my reality, too. I remember sitting in the lobby of a nursing home during a visit. Everything looked the same shade of beige. The air had a certain smell. The atmosphere felt heavy. And as I looked around, one thought crossed my mind. If this is what life at 95 is supposed to look like, I'm not ready for it. So I made a decision that surprised everyone around me. My name is Sylvia, although around the apartment the girls call me Grandma Sylvie. For 70 years I lived in the same house, the same bedroom where my husband once slept beside me, until the morning he didn't wake up anymore. After he passed away, something strange happened to the house. It became loud, not noisy, loud. The quiet itself felt overwhelming. The refrigerator humming, the ticking clock on the wall, the sound of the mail carrier walking past without stopping because hardly anyone sends letters anymore. Those small sounds began to echo through the rooms. Then my knees started giving me trouble. Not suddenly, nothing dramatic. It was more like watching an old hinge slowly stiffen with rust. One afternoon, I slipped on the basement stairs. It wasn't a terrible fall. I simply landed hard and sat there on the steps. But when I tried to stand up, I couldn't. I stayed there on the cold wooden stairs for nearly 40 minutes while my hip ached and complained, and the whole time one thought kept repeating in my head, so this is how it begins. What frightened me most wasn't the fall itself. It was what came afterward. Nothing happened, no phone call, no knock on the door, no one asking if I was okay. I realized that if the fall had been worse, if I had hit my head or broken something, no one would have known. That moment is when my daughter started saying the word concerned. She found a nursing home that cost about $4,200 every month. I agreed to visit once. Inside, the residents were gathered in a large activity room. Bingo at 2 o'clock, movie night on Fridays, and I remember thinking to myself, I may be 95, but my mind still works. While I was there, a woman sitting nearby reached out and held my hand. Her fingers were cold. She leaned closer and asked, "Are you moving in?" I told her I was just visiting. She whispered quietly, "Good. Don't stay here. Once you do, people forget you exist." That sentence stayed with me long after I left. I went home and told my daughter very clearly, "No, I'm not moving into a nursing home." But there was still a problem. I also knew I couldn't keep living alone forever. The stairs were becoming difficult. The house was too large for one person, and the silence had started to feel unbearable. So what do you do when the safe choices all feel like giving up? Sometimes you invent a completely different option. One afternoon at the library, I noticed a flyer on a bulletin board. It said, "Roommate wanted, cheap rent, Must be comfortable with irregular schedules and loud music. I stood there staring at that little piece of paper for several minutes. Then I picked up my phone and called the number. The person on the other end asked a simple question. How old are you? 95, I answered. There was a long pause. You're serious? Very. I explained my situation. They needed help covering rent, and I needed people nearby in case I ever needed assistance. Finally, the voice said, All right, when can you move in? That was 4 months ago. Now I share an apartment with 3 college students, Jess, Anna, and Sophie. They each pay $400 in rent. I contribute $500. And let me tell you something nobody warns you about living with college students. It's chaotic. Jess plays Billie Eilish late at night. Anna sometimes cooks spicy curry at midnight. Sophie occasionally brings friends over who become very confused when they see me sitting at the kitchen table drinking tea. One young man once froze when he noticed me. Hello, ma'am, he said nervously. Sophie laughed and said, Relax, that's Grandma Sylvie. And the truth is, I don't mind the noise or the visitors. What mattered most to me was something much simpler. I wasn't alone anymore. And whenever I actually do need help, someone is nearby. A few nights ago, Anna came home upset after failing an exam. She sat at the table crying at 2 in the morning. I quietly made her some tea and sat with her. After a while, she said, Thank you, Sylvie. My mom probably would have just yelled at me. I told her gently, Your mom isn't here tonight, but I am. That moment made me realize something important. In a nursing home, someone might bring you tea when you need it, but there's a difference between receiving care and being able to care for someone else. That difference matters more than people realize. Over time, I've come to understand something simple about human beings. We don't just need assistance, we need witnesses. Someone who notices if you fall. Someone who asks whether you ate dinner. Someone who sits beside you when you're worried or afraid. Nursing homes provide care, and sometimes they are absolutely necessary. But being cared for doesn't always mean being truly seen. Living alone can feel the same way, invisible. Here, things are different. Jess reminds me about my medication, not because it's her responsibility, but because she cares. Sophie walks with me to the grocery store simply because she's going anyway. I'm not their patient, I'm their roommate. And that distinction changes everything. I understand that this situation won't last forever. There may come a day when I require more support than 3 college students can reasonably give. But that day hasn't arrived yet. And until it does, I refuse to spend my time waiting for it. Last Sunday, Jess had several friends visiting the apartment. One of them looked confused and asked, Who's the older lady? Jess smiled and said, That's Sylvie. She lives here. The friend asked, Like your grandmother? Jess shook her head. No, she's our roommate. Then she added something that made me laugh. She's the best roommate I've ever had. She doesn't steal food. She's always home if I forget my keys. And she makes amazing banana bread. I don't bake for them because I have to. I bake because I want to. Because here, I'm still treated like a person, not a patient. If you're watching this and feeling worried about the future, worried about losing independence or being alone, I understand that feeling. Nursing homes aren't bad places. For many people, they provide necessary care, but they're not the only possibility. Sometimes the real question is this: who might still benefit from the things you have to offer? I'm 95 years old, living with 3 college students who play loud music and leave dishes in the sink, and I've never felt less lonely. If this story gave you something to think about, consider subscribing to No Filter Advice, where we share honest reflections about life, aging, and the choices people make as they grow older. Because your life doesn't end at a certain age. Sometimes it simply changes direction, and occasionally that change can be better than you expected. Just last week, I dropped my cane in the hallway. Within seconds, Jess knocked on my door. "Sylvie, are you okay?" I was fine. I had only dropped the cane, but she heard the sound. And that small moment reminded me of something important. There's a difference between being looked after and being noticed. And in the end, being noticed is all I ever really needed.